From Chicago, welcome to 3Degrees Discussions. I'm your host, Mike Vasquez. This is a podcast devoted to the stories behind the innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders in the 3D printing industry.
Why are we here? Why we do this at a brewery? And people start, it's because it's fun. It's like, yeah, it is fun. Because it's easier to network when you're socializing. It's like, yes, that's true. Why else? And there's an answer, but I can't give it here because it would spoil every other one of the events.
We reached out to a lot of people we knew in the industry and kind of did this, pitched the same idea that David had pitched to me. And I think everyone had the same reaction I did. That was like, this just makes sense.
That was David Tucker and Kristin Mulherin. Combined, these two have years of AM experience and over the past several months have worked together to create the ImplementAM workshop series across the country. This episode features the story of how these workshops came to be and the gap they saw in the AM event circuit. Before we get started, head over to www.3degreescompany.com and subscribe to the podcast. Remember, you can listen to your show anywhere you download your podcast, including Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or Stitcher. Also, if you or your company are looking for materials, qualification, or general AM support, reach out to the team through our website.
All right. Thanks so much for joining me, Kristen and David. Excited to talk about ImplementAM and all the work that you guys have been doing to put these events on around the country. But first, I'd like to kind of get to some context for all the listeners, and it would be great if both of you could just do kind of a short introduction of kind of how you got into additive and kind of how you got to the kind of the space where you are today with working on these different events and all the other work that you're doing. So, Kristen, you want to start? Kind of get a little bit of background for the audience.
I got into additive quite a while ago on the metal side of things. Actually, I started with a company called LPW, which is now Carpenter Additive. They do the metal powders for laser powder bed fusion. It was, I tell people always the same story. It was in the UK, and I moved to the UK, and about a month after I moved there, I went to Formnext for the first time, and I'll never forget when I walked in. It was that moment where I was like, this is an industry I will never leave. I knew it was it. That was where I belonged. It was really cool. So, since then I've worked all across the industry, from, the analytical equipment side at Thermo Fisher. I joined HP, which is where I met, David, back in, I think it's 2018 when we met back then. And that is when I moved over to the plastic side of the industry doing, working on the MJF printer. I've since been a consultant for several years, my own company, working across then, the whole industry with service bureaus, software providers, materials people, end users. And just recently, I'm now just joined Hubble as the head of additive manufacturing technology, which has been really fun so far. It's been hectic and crazy, but really, really, really fun. So,
what is Hubble?
So Hubble is it's a big electrical solutions provider. So essentially, the simple way to say it is, if it's, they call it before the meter or after the meter. So, that being kind of like the utility poles. So, there's utility pole type stuff, and then there's stuff in your house, but pretty much everywhere you go, there's a Hubble product that you just don't know about. It's quite large when you're in the electrical solutions space.
All right, David, you're up.
Yeah. So how I got started, I would say, really, I've always used additive manufacturing for like a 3D printing and like prototyping I'm a plastics engineer. It was kind of everything I developed had always used that. And I would say, and I was working at HP, I think the year it was like 2016, like at the very beginning of like MJF, and they were looking for someone who understood plastics and understood automotive product development. And I happened to be working there in procurement, buying injection molds, and had all my background had been in commercial truck and passenger vehicle development, and so really transitioned into that well, how do you get people to use a digital manufacturing process, and by the way, we want to use it for production, not for prototype, and it was so it was a really great time because it was like coming up in a world where nothing existed. Materials weren't approved by customers. It was like unknown, like what really digital production was or digital manufacturing. Supply chains didn't exist, and really, so I kind of fell into, and I being like one of the first real users. of like MJF from like this like production angle, and I was developing or helping a team develop their 500 series, 300 and 500 series printer, which is like a full color printer. And so we were like developing supply chains and doing a lot of really fun stuff for that. The organization took note of some of that success, and I found myself working with automotive companies, kind of leading, guiding, inspiring them to do very similar things inside of their organizations. It really comes down to like, well, how do you operationalize a digital manufacturing process inside of an organization, right? Organizations need standards, operation procedures, and had a lot of fun doing that. Got to a point where I really just didn't like, listening to someone's problem and saying, "Oh, your solution is buying a printer." There's many. You're listening to a problem, and it's like, going to that, that's that solution. So, through my network and through really where I wanted to go, I took a really strong look at providing parts, and joined Forecast 3D at the time, being acquired by GKN, and started developing products and solutions that really were like, that could resonate for an automotive company, and developed a couple things there, and really developed MVPs for them, tested the market, and had some pretty good success. Ended up having a brief stint at Stanley Black & Decker. We could unpack that and we could do a podcast just on that experience. But now am really independent in helping people, including myself, develop additive manufacturing products and services. So whether it's a service that relies on additive or a product that relies on additive, and helping companies kind of change the way that they're maybe bundling or offering or productizing digital solutions. And I have a lot of fun doing that. And that's really what I enjoy doing.
Fantastic. And so the theme of today's conversations around kind of these events that you've been putting on over the last, 6 months, maybe almost a year? When was the first one?
We started talking about this in December, and then did our very first one very quickly in January in Detroit.
So let's maybe like rewind back to that time. I mean, what was the seed? What were some of those like conversations? Like, what was was this on the back of a bar napkin? What was the start of it?
I mean, David deserves all the credit for sure, because he did this. He did a similar thing back when we both worked at HP in 2018, and I went to it as an attendee. And then he reached out to me and said, "I'm thinking about doing these again. You wanna join me?" And I was like, "Definitely," because I'd gone to that event and I loved it. So that's my story.
Yeah, one of these things where it's like productizing and services. Well, it's like I see a gap in the industry that I think it fills. We can get into that, but how it started was exactly that. I called up Kristen and said, "Hey, I've got an idea," and I didn't I knew that she was extremely talented and smart. I did not realize that it was like at the end of the conversation there would be like an LLC, a website, like every operational element needed for a business entity, I think was done within like at least 48 hours. And as an innovator, having that like forcing function to like, we're doing this thing, we're committing today, we're moving forward, really helps like the product development process, and helps you innovate. So you've been a great partner throughout this, because of that. I can live in this product development space, creating things and not moving anything forward in that. And so it was a really good partnership, just from the beginning.
Our differences have served us very well, I think, and it's been really fun.
And so what's the concept? Maybe for those who aren't aware of the event, hasn't gone to one, like what is it?
Yeah. Well, I like music a lot, so I use like analogies to like the music industry. someone who attends events, I've recognized that a lot of the events in additive have gotten really big, and I call them destination festivals, where it's like, I like music events. I like Lollapalooza. Lollapalooza is a great destination festival. And they're actually really similar to Lollapalooza, where it's like, I am in love with these artists or in love with this technology. There's a lot of really great people. It's going to be a really great environment. We're going to like have a great shared experience. But unfortunately, I have to take a week off work. I have to spend a week in Chicago, and it's very expensive. And you start seeing that, you're like, well, to drive an inclusive community, that's maybe not the best business model, So it was like, well, how do we take like a tour, do more of a tour, right? Where it's like, well, you have cities, it's very local, it's very like designed for the community, and kind of brings those elements to people locally, maybe smaller, it's like you're not going to be like, 5,000 people in, you're going to be, sub 100. Okay. More of like an intimate show. And that was the concept that I had brought to Kristen, and we have started really developing and innovating around.
Did you have I mean, the big conferences, I totally agree with you. They're huge now, whether it's Formnext or even Rapid and AMUG, like each has a different flavor. Now you've got TCT USA. There's a lot of them.
And they're all great. I want to they're all really, really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have to say they're all great, but I think each have their pros and cons.
Yeah.
But but I think they're so agree with you that they're so big now. It's so broad, right? And so in some cases for different users or like people who have been established, like they kind of know, okay, I'm going to see these 3 people. I know they make it a small mini conference because they're just going to see those group of people. But how do you kind of theme around what you're doing, right? Because additive is so big, right? Like there's different tentacles in different directions. Like what did you kind of coalesce on a theme of what you wanted these events to talk about or kind of revolve around pretty early on?
I think it's more about getting people to think differently. It's geared for people who are newer to the industry for sure. And obviously we do present content, that's, on specific technologies and things like that, but it's not really the point. It's about getting people to think differently because, one of the biggest hurdles that I think we're all aware of in this industry of making it mainstream is just that fear and that lack of knowledge of how to jump across that chasm. So that's kind of the point, is to give people the tools and the thought processes and to be able to make that leap. And be able to leave that knowing the local people in your, in the people who it's very local attendees. So you meet all the people in your, region that are have similar interests, and know when you leave who to reach out to for more information and how to continue to go along that journey.
I think the other really cool thing that I've seen on the events that you have is it's a really interesting mix of the local folks. And then you've got kind of this national group of sponsors or partners, right? Whether it's machine manufacturers or software folks that also engage in different ways. So you want to talk a little bit about how did that come about, or what was the special kind of sauce mix with getting kind of other like-minded people involved?
From a sponsorship point of view, I think we reached out to a lot of people we knew in the industry and kind of did this, pitched the same idea that David had pitched to me. And I think everyone had the same reaction I did. That was like, this just makes sense. Having a smaller gathering of local people geared towards, collaboration and group exercises and, trying our best, to get away from PowerPoint, which is totally impossible in reality, but we're doing our best. Create this kind of workshop-based atmosphere. Everyone just got it. I think everyone's tired of being spoken at these days. And so it was an opportunity for them to develop their own personalized workshops to be able to, again, help people facilitate through their own personal journey based on whatever they happen to do, from a software perspective or whatever. But we've made it very clear to our sponsors as well that it needs to be, brand agnostic. So we try to have non-competing sponsors at all of the events so that they can talk about, instead of talking about their brand, they can talk about powder bed fusion in general, or software or product development from a service bureau's point of view or whatever. We try to keep it really, really broad again, so there's no branding involved. But everyone's on board and gets it.
They're all at a brewery, right?
Yeah. That's like an interesting. I can't spoil it, but we start every event. It's like we say, "Hey, we're at a brewery. Why are we here? Why we do this at a brewery?" And people start. It's because it's fun. It's like, yeah, it is fun because it's easier to network when you're socializing. It's like, yes, that's true. Why else? And there's an answer, but I can't give it here because it would spoil every other one of the events because it comes over really well. So
awesome. And what's the maybe I think each is probably a little bit different, but do you want to just like walk through like what, like as an attendee, like what should you expect? Like what sorts of things are you doing? Is it a day? Is it a half a day? Kind of what are like some of the experience from the attendee side?
Yeah, it's a full day event, culminating at the end of the day with a happy hour because of course we're at a brewery. Why would we not? We do a lot of one of the things we've discovered. It's been an iterative process. Obviously, we've learned along the way, and one of the things we've discovered is people really want to get to know each other. It's very much a networking event in a lot of ways, in addition to the learning. And so we make a big effort to make sure that the attendees get to know everybody. And we do different things to essentially shuffle them around and make sure that they sit at different tables with different people throughout the day. And there's a lot of, again, these small group workshops. So, anywhere from 4 to 6 people. And working through different exercises that David has created or through, directly or through in collaboration with some of the sponsors. And then, of course, there is some content that's more educational from a more traditional point of view in terms of, like I said, giving people kind of a background on some of the foundational technologies. David probably has a more interesting way of explaining it than I do.
Overall, we want everything to be fun. And we kind of, let's say, focus grouped it a bit with a couple people early on, specifically Ken Burns with GK and Forecast, Kyle Harvey with Xtol, Chris with Freeform. And we really said, we're thinking about doing this. And the first iteration, I guess it's like I'm also like kind of an academic, was like, oh, let's take a case study approach. It's like, well, let's take people through the emotional journey of developing these products that are like, digitally produced. Let's take a case study and really help people back into like how to find solutions. Quickly realized the overhead to do that is immense. It would be great, but the amount to get people to the time to put into it to turn like a case study into very clear learning objectives. There's a reason why Harvard makes a lot of money doing this kind of stuff. Still think it's a great idea. It's just not. It takes a lot. So we ended up going to more of like collaborative things that get people to communicate and talk, and have developed those with partners. What jumps to mind is like, Stefan from Elnick has provided excellent support. Aiden from MIT, we developed a really great workshop that's around assessing parts for technology fit and good idea fit, which I think was an excellent thing. And he gets total credit for good idea fit. To like assess parts in like a group setting and then have like a discussion exercise at the end. But ultimately the goal is just to get us, try to step away as much from PowerPoint as possible. At first we would give people the challenge is, hey, no PowerPoint. And so, part of the goal of a business is like, well, you have to bring people in to help financially support it. When you would like put that objective, it's just too hard. People's like, oh, all right, well, this is great. Let me know how it goes. I'm gonna be out for this one. And and then we're like, all right, well, how do we make this like easily accomplished? Or maybe like build a beachhead, like something that's like, that's like simple, put some constraints on it. That's not so like, we're not going to use PowerPoint, so it's kind of a hybrid now. Some people show up with PowerPoints, and we try to like drive as much interaction as possible. It's like we'll have like reflective moments or something during that PowerPoint that like enables people to like talk. And Kristen brought in something that was like really, really great. It was like if you do a presentation, right? If I give a presentation for 50 people, you get to the end, and you say, "Are there any questions? Like, I'm excited to talk about this." Everyone will sit there. It's like, well, I don't want to ask the question first. I don't want to. Maybe I was like busy with my cell phone for like a second and I didn't get all the details, or maybe I'm like, this is like really technical and I'm interested, but I don't want to come across as like I don't know. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. So she brought in this idea of, we'll have the groups talk amongst themselves for a couple minutes, and then each group ask a question, and it just opens up this immense floodgate of like questions from everyone. Sometimes it's almost too much. We're like, guys, we're blowing through our time limit. Like we're literally serious now. Like you only get one question, per group, but it's a good problem to have.
That's awesome. And which cities have you done so far?
We started in Detroit, and then Los Angeles, then Boston, and then just very recently we were in Denver. And then we have Milwaukee coming up on August 17th. It's going to be apparently it's a cool part of Milwaukee. I'm not familiar with Milwaukee, so I can't wait to go because it's in the 3rd Ward, which apparently is a really cool part of Milwaukee. And then Austin is firmed up. And then we're thinking probably Charlotte for October. But the goal is to have a different city every month. So we have a few in the pipeline in the works. And those are Austin's for sure, and Charlotte is a definite maybe.
You also see when you select cities or when you plant down in a city that there are specific industry personalities to them. Like I imagine what's going on in Milwaukee is different than Denver. That's different in Boston.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting. It's been kind of an interesting, I think, exploration for both of us in terms of, there's the obvious, industry segments. Like obviously Detroit was heavily automotive. And Los Angeles was very heavily aerospace, but there's different vibes. Obviously, the LA event was very different than the Detroit event. Partly because the brew pubs are quite different in LA than they are from Detroit. But you just get a whole different feel. And we've learned a lot about kind of what makes sense. We're finding kind of these middle markets are the ones that we're trying to target a lot of the ones that people don't typically get things like this in. Like Milwaukee doesn't typically get their own events. I think most people go to Chicago. So we're trying to hit kind of those places as well that have, obviously like Charlotte has a lot of interest. There's a lot of additive manufacturing happening in Charlotte, but, I've never been to an event in Charlotte. So, we want to try to hit those places.
And a couple more questions out of my curiosity. I mean, what's for each of you, like going to attending the event and facilitating and listening to the attendees, like what's each of you like the most surprising thing that you've heard during one of the classes during one of the workshops?
Ooh, I'm going to give that to David. I got to think.
Yeah. So everyone is different. I learned something at all of them, but really it's like product folks, people who like get additive. I think we all kind of come to like very similar strategies or very similar conclusions. The one that was most surprising to me was in LA with Jeff Campbell from Relativity Space. Gave an amazing presentation on how they 3D print a rocket, and it's using their own proprietary methods. She kind of shared some details about it, and very similar to, I mean, it's obviously something very large, but very, very similar to methodology for how you should unpack or create a design methodology for any product.
Yeah, we try to get a keynote speaker at all the events, that at least one. We actually had 2 in Denver that are not sponsor based or anything like that. They're just expert practitioners of 3D printing within their specific area of expertise. That typically have like a long history within the industry. Like our first one was, we're really fortunate in Detroit to have Harold Sears, who I think, a lot of people know as being kind of, huge in the automotive side of AM. And so I think those specifically have always been really insightful because it's people who've been in the industry and been doing this for tens, of years sometimes.
Yeah.
So you've got the the next event coming up in Milwaukee. You want to give the details on that, so if people want to kind of go check it out or go find out information, or even if they're not in Milwaukee, like where would they go to find out when it's nearby them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so it's Milwaukee's August 17th, as I mentioned. So we always do them on a Thursday. And you can find all the information on just implementam.com. And you can sign up for future events as well, just to be notified. So we have a bunch of different cities listed there. And honestly, if we get enough registrants for any given city, we'll just do it. You know, the beauty of it is it's David and I, and so we have that flexibility, and we can just change, direction on a dime. So there's that option, and then there's also, you can just let us know, email us as well, either on LinkedIn or just through the website is probably the best way to do it. In terms of like, hey, can we do one in my city? We're more than happy to look into that if there's an interest.
Awesome. Yeah, and we so 3Degrees, we have a team that's spread out around the country, and we happened to have a couple people in Denver for the last event, and so I heard from Jim and the team that we sent there that it was an awesome event. They're already doing networking after the fact, so
cool.
It was heard a lot of good things from it. I'm excited to attend my first one soon, one of these days when we get over there. But thank you both for all the work that you're doing. I think this is awesome to kind of reach different markets with different ideas in the industry, and keep up the awesome work and awesome support of the industry.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.